I was tempted to give up on faith and faith in God altogether. In my depression and my doubt, it almost got the best of me. I'm not quite sure why I didn't. I think one of the reasons, though, was because deep down inside of me, I just really couldn't believe that life is so totally meaningless. And I think that kept me going and kept me searching for answers. The only way I knew to search for answers, and I think part of this is because what I was taught in church originally, is that faith is a matter of the mind. And so the way you get answers is by study. I think that was still with me in many ways, in spite of my deconstruction. So the only thing I knew to do was go on in school. And that's what I did. I went on and I did graduate work. I got 2 master's degrees in theology and a PhD in historical theology, emphasizing modern approaches to knowing God. I studied both atheists and theists, and I studied very, very diligently. I also taught some college courses in scripture and in historical theology. So these years were an intense time of study and meditation for me. They didn't take away my doubt, but they did teach me that deconstruction is nothing new. People have been doing it for centuries. Lots of people have gone through that. We call it deconstruction today. It wasn't always called that, but it's the same thing. And 4 people in particular that I met or learned about during these years made particular impressions on me. People who had deconstructed and reconstructed. And I kind of like to call them my Fab Four of spiritual reconstruction. Just like the Beatles, the Fab Four was the greatest rock and roll band in history. For me, this Fab Four helped me to find a new foundation for my faith. The first member of my Fab Four was named Tom Olbricht. He was one of my teachers. Like me, he was a farm boy. He was a farm boy from Iowa. And when he came to school, he began to realize that there were problems with faith. And he had to come to terms with errors in the Bible and problems of suffering and doubt. And he went to school to try to find answers. And he was a lot smarter than me. He ended up doing his graduate work at Harvard. But he was also very much a down-to-earth guy and remained a farm boy at heart. The key thing I learned from him is that the Bible does indeed have errors, and it's okay to admit that. But the Bible doesn't care that it has errors, because the Bible itself doesn't focus on knowing God in that way. The Bible focuses on knowing God in love. And the best way to judge the credibility of the Bible is by judging the credibility of that message of love. He suggested that we should read the Bible through the lens of love. And he also said that the Bible itself calls us to do that, and then to make our decisions about faith. That was a tremendous insight and help to me, and it continues to help me to this day. And that led me to my next member of my Fab Four, Karl Barth. Karl Barth was a Swiss minister who later in his life had to reject and completely deconstruct all that he was taught when he was younger, because it failed him in the toughest times. And he began to read the Bible. All he knew to do was just to start over completely and just begin reading the Bible again and see what he found. He admitted that the Bible had lots of errors. But like Tom Olbricht, Karl Barth found the key focus of the Bible was on love and what it claimed about love. And so he was able to rebuild his faith on that basis. Now, He lived from 1886 to 1968, so just as he was beginning to get a foundation on his faith, the Nazis arose in Germany, where he taught. Barth believed he was called by the message that he found in the Bible to oppose the Nazis, and he did it. He wrote tracts directly opposing Hitler, and he helped organize a movement in the German churches to oppose Hitler. Because of this, Barth lost his job teaching. His books were banned, and eventually he was forced to leave Germany and to live in Switzerland. But even from there, Barth continued to work opposing Hitler and to support efforts to do so. Late in life, Barth wrote what I like to call an extended poem reflecting on the love of Jesus. In English, this poem lasts for 14 volumes, and it was unfinished at his death. But today it is looked upon as one of the greatest theological writings of the 20th century, and Barth is thought of as possibly the greatest Protestant theologian of the 20th century. Barth helped me because he said that the convincing factor in our faith is the beauty of the love of God that we see in Jesus in the Bible. He believed that was the convincing factor. And that really refocused my attention on this love and what it was about it that could be so credible. Barth led me to rethink another person that I had heard speak a few years before, and this person is the third member of my spiritual Fab Four, and that person is Hans Küng. Hans Küng was a Swiss Catholic priest who I had heard speak at Vanderbilt, and I was attracted to him because he openly admitted the errors in Scripture and the problems that suffering and evil brought to faith. He had to deconstruct when he was younger as well, because he was raised a good Catholic and wanted to be a priest, but when he got to school, he confronted the errors in the Bible, and for him, a Catholic, he also had to realize there were errors in the church. And he wrote about this and tried to be open and honest about it in his writings for the rest of his life. And yet he was able to find a foundation to help him reconstruct, a foundation of trust and love. He still believed. In fact, later he wrote a book called Why I'm Still a Christian. Barth was, I found out, his mentor when Küng was younger. During Küng's period of Reconstruction, Barth helped him, and they were close friends for many, many years. So I eventually decided to write my doctoral dissertation on Karl Barth and Hans Küng. I got to meet, through writing my dissertation, I got to meet Hans Küng in Tübingen, Germany. And Küng helped me develop my dissertation. I will always be grateful to him for that. What I learned from Hans Küng is that doubt is a part of faith, and that we shouldn't flee doubt, but rather we should embrace our doubt and let it lead us to deeper insights. I also learned from him that risk is involved in trusting. Risk is always involved in love. But if we take that risk, Küng believed that our faith could provide a peace. Love could provide a peace that gave great credibility to the risk of loving. Well, the final person in my Fab Four is Martin Luther King Jr. I remember hearing about Dr. King on television when I was a child. And really, I kind of initially got back to thinking about King and his work and reading his works more seriously when I was studying about Gandhi and Gandhi's convictions. I learned that Martin Luther King had gone to school. He, just like me, he had gotten a PhD in theology, but that when he was in school, he talked openly about his struggles. He found out there were errors in Scripture, the literalism, the sectarianism of fundamentalism. He had to reject all of that. Martin Luther King had to deconstruct And yet he was able to find a foundation upon which he could reconstruct, and look at what he accomplished with his reconstruction. I learned from him that, like Gandhi believed, the love of Jesus is found in other religious traditions as well. But I also saw in Dr. King a foundation of love. Dr. King believed love was the essence of religion, and love was the foundation of everything he did in his civil rights work. And look at what he accomplished with that. Through the power of that love, he was able to make such great changes in our culture. Through nonviolent love, he was able to, as he said, turn his enemies into his friends. That, to me, gave great credibility to this kind of unconditional love that I had learned about from the Bible, through Tom Olbricht, and through Karl Barth, and through Hans Kuhn. Dr. King said that this love is the key that unlocks the door that leads to ultimate reality. He really began to say to me that God is love. And he would quote 1 John chapter 4 in his writings, and saying that all the time. And I began to see through Dr. King that the question about God is really, in essence, a question about love. What love is, what love means, and the credibility that it brings us when we take the risk to trust it. Well, this Fab Four challenged me not just in my mind, but in my heart as well. It challenged me to look around in my own life and ask the question, has this love been in my life all the time? And maybe I've just missed it. And I thought about my parents and all the sacrifices that they made to love me in my life. I thought about the people at church who, even though they taught me wrong about religion, in their lives, they loved me in a way that stayed with me for the rest of my life and that made a real difference in my life. I thought about my girlfriend, who later became my wife, who stuck with me when I was struggling. And I brought all sorts of questions and stuff to her, dumped on her all the time. And she was there for me throughout all of that, never flinching in any of it. That was that unconditional love. I looked at others I had known through the years, nurses that I'd seen in the ICU who worked long hours to serve their patients. The people that had called me to offer encouragement in my times of depression and doubt. A child who saved her allowance for a whole year in order to buy her mother a special birthday gift. A soldier in war who dived in front of bullets in order to save his buddy. Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor in India and credited love as the essence of religious faith. Or Martin Luther King Jr., who gave his life in order to bring freedom not just to his own people, but to all people, because the love of Jesus challenged him to love all people in this way. I had to believe, when I reflected for a few years on this love and on its presence in life, that it was indeed effective and real. I came to believe that God is believable because this love is credible. For God is this love. In our next time together, I would like to talk a little more about the credibility that this love brings and what it says about who God is.